Okay, so I'm a I'm on YouTube and I'm watching some Chris Ray Gun videos. Of course, I got to get my daily dose of shit lord in. Um, Being a black guy who is a liberal, seeing all of this SJW bullshit and the Black Lives Matters movements, irrational baby attitude toward dealing with very complicated adult issues and not saying anything about it is just it's horrifying to see this kind of shit, right? And to not say anything. And recently, today, I've watched a Chris Ray-Gun video, and he's talking about these Milwaukee riots. Apparently, there's Milwaukee riots in 2016. Now, Milwaukee is a city that has had shit tons of riots in the past, right? I didn't even know this about Milwaukee. I just put it in Google and found that there's Milwaukee riots from 1968, and there's one from 2014, and like there's a bunch of fucking riots that have happened in this city before, um, and a lot of them have been race riots, if not all of them. And so this riot that recently happened, Chris Ray Gun claimed that it was about this guy who was caught with a gun by the police, and apparently he was fleeing from them, and they shot at him. I don't know the entirety of the situation like that, but I just wanted to, I guess, document my doing some research into this situation, so that I could kind of have a paper trail, or I guess a digital trail, as to my understanding of this situation, because I'm coming completely blind to this. I don't know what the fuck is going on. I don't know why this even happened, other than what I've heard from Chris Ray Gun. So I found this article. I just looked it up. I just put it in, Milwaukee riots 2016 into Bing. I mean, I don't use Google. Fuck Google. Uh, except more when I'm looking up porn or something like that. Then Google is awesome. But the fact of the matter is, I'm looking in Bing and I find this website. It's called NY Daily News, NewYorkDailyNews.com. And there is this guy named Sean King. You gotta bear with me because this website I'm on, for some reason, is really slow, and I have no idea why. It probably has to do with me opening up all this. I have a bunch of open shit in my computer. I'll take some of this off of my computer so it doesn't have to process too much. Um, Click some of this stuff off real quick. All right, so yeah, my computer it's weak. It's weak as hell. But that's beside the point. So this is an article by this guy named Sean King. Right? He he made this article in August, the 15th, and it's the 16th of August. So I'm answering this a day afterward and then giving my personal feelings, because I don't fully agree with a lot of the stuff that King is writing, but I do agree with some of the stuff. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm recording it right now as I'm reading this, because I wanted to get every nuanced response in here and not have to wait and think about exactly what I wanted to say. Mostly because I don't want to do any fucking too much thinking. I want to be able to get my exact response right now. Um, so he writes, the title of this article is King in all caps. And I'm thinking he's referring to Martin Luther King, because he talks about Martin Luther King throughout this article. King. Milwaukee riots weren't just caused by Civil Smith's death or police brutality, but years of injustice. Right. Now that I think about it, this is the whole this is my first time reading this. And, well, I actually went through it a little bit, but this is the whole I'm doing this off the top of the head. This is where that's coming in. He's not talking about Martin Luther King when he writes the title. I just realized that he's talking about himself. Because his name is Sean King too. Yeah, that's not fucking confusing. But anyway, he's claiming that the death of this person, Sybil Smith, which I don't think that's the gentleman that Chris Ray Gun was talking about that got killed. So I don't know. I guess that's a confusing part here. That apparently is not the same thing that happened, because I don't know who Sybil Smith is. I could go ahead and put that in thing, and we can check out who Sybil Smith is. That's why I want to do this way. Let's learn together about what the fuck is going on with this shit and why this is happening. If my internet would dare to fucking work. Okay, I put in Bing and it's walking like a bow-legged hooker. Civil Smith death. Put in Civil Smith death. All right. Oh, that is him. Okay. Father blames himself for being wrong role model. So Civil is this guy's name. Huh. That's interesting. Civil Smith. Sister of Civil Smith believes Milwaukee cop knew slain brother from high school. Father of Civil Smith. When they see the wrong role model, this is what you get. I just read. Those are just some titles of some articles. From the first one was the Huffington Post. The second was the New York Daily News. Hey, that's where I am right now. And the last one was Breitbart, Breitbart News. So I was just looking at some stuff after I searched it in Bing. But yeah, that is him, Civil Smith. Okay, well let's go back to NY. Oh Jesus Christ, my internet's awful. Let's go. Hurry the hell up. Wasting my time. Refresh. All right. So I'll just edit this out, this waiting out, because what the hell is the use of having it? Anyway, so the article I was talking about before by Sean King begins like this. Dr. King, who is actually a very woke radical, said in a March 1968 speech that a riot is the language of the unheard. Okay. Um, a very woke radical, I feel like you're being relative about that, and you know you are. No, Dr. King was not I'm going to destroy shit and that will be the way I use my voice. You know damn well that's not how Dr. King did that. He was a radical, and you actually go into this, Mr. King. You actually go into this later on, talking about how he was relatively a radical for the time. He was a radical. His actions are not considered radical now, but they were considered radical back then, obviously, for obvious reasons, because racism was more accepted back then. You know that. You know that that's why he was considered a radical. It's not because he was actually the same type of rioting motherfucker that was that was going around doing the Milwaukee riots in 1968. So anyway, I want to lead, going back to the article, I want to lead with Dr. King, in part because his words are so often bastardized by enemies of the Black Lives Matter movement, to explain why our modern day concerns and methods are all wrong. Daily, I see some conservatives say Dr. King would be turning over in his grave if he knew this, that, or the other about black folk today. That's garbage. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything we are dealing with today, ranging from police brutality to overt discrimination to income inequality to the unrest and riots that often grow out of such conditions, was deeply and painfully familiar to Dr. King as well. So I really like the way he starts this article. It's really well thought out. You can see that he clearly has a bias for the Black Lives Matter movement and against the people who he says, quote, are enemies of the Black Lives Matter movement. He assumes that conservatives say Dr. King will be turning in his grave, but hey, I have been saying that, right? And I'm a fucking liberal. And I'm not a regressive. I'm a liberal. I'm not an SJW. I'm a liberal. I'm the actual definition of what a liberal is. Excuse me. I don't know why I'm coughing so much. But yeah, he says that when he said that, when I read this, I was thinking of just like reading a bunch of articles and then talking about it. But when I read him say that, when I read that in his article, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You know what I'm saying? So he's heard this before, and of course, I'm not the only one that would have said something like this. But that right there, when I read that, it made me go, I need to read more into this and see what's going on. Ugh. So, continuing, he was arrested at least 30 times in protests and excuse me, demonstrations over inequality in America. Yeah, that makes sense because back then, what he was doing was considered radical. Back when he was being arrested, critics would probably say, critics were probably saying Booker T. Washington will be turning over in his grave over Dr. King's practices. Yeah, they probably were. But there's a huge fucking difference between what the Milwaukee rioters were caught saying, like, he's white, get his ass, and Dr. King's fucking talking about how he wishes that that little white girls and little white boys and little black boys and little black girls could play together. There's a huge fucking difference in that. Culturally, our culture was different, and so you would see that culture respond to something we consider innocuous as if it's like this big fucking thing. Sure, that's just accepted. That's just understood because it's a different time frame, right? It's a different era in American history. So yeah, this is possible that people could have been saying that about how Booker T. Washington would be turning in his grave over Dr. King's sit-ins and marches. King called these protests and other actions civil disobedience. Right. The way he did it, civil disobedience, was not to run around telling people to attack white people. He didn't run around with fucking cameras destroying his own shit in his city, in the city that he lived in his communities, and yet these riots do. Right? That doesn't mean that clearly Dr. Martin Luther King may have said that this is the the riot is the language of the unheard, but still, that doesn't mean that he engaged in the shit. You know what I'm saying? Don't insinuate that he would he would run around doing this if he had the chance, because he didn't when he did have the chance. He was arrested for innocuous shit. People that are doing Black Lives Matter nowadays is not doing innocuous shit. They're calling for, I mean, now Black Lives Matter is a movement, right? But it doesn't have like a head. It doesn't have a leader, and that's understandable that, you know, sometimes these grassroots-led movements don't have leaders. But people who are in Black Lives Matter have been recorded saying the most emotional shit ever. None of it is really well thought out at all. They've been recorded several times, not only being beaten intellectually, but also beating themselves intellectually by showing you that they're out to extend racism and segregation by engaging in this cultural appropriation bullshit, talking about how, oh, you can't have that because it's mine. No, it's not fucking yours. You don't own braids, bitch. You don't speak for all black people. Who the fuck are you talking about? I mean, I have a bunch of videos, by the way, to digress. I have a bunch of PTAs, practical thinking actions, where I'm a whole hell of a lot more composed. But since this is off the cuff, then I'm going to go in an off the cuff manner. I don't fucking know you just because you're black. You are not able to speak for me just because I'm African American. Okay? You don't own fucking braids, just like white people don't own hockey because originally white people came up with hockey. That is a fucking sophomore childish mindset that I used to have when I was a fucking kid. Now that I'm an adult, I know better. That's not how culture works. Race is tied to culture. Culture is not necessarily tied to your race. Okay? You can grow up in any culture and be a certain colored person. It is not required. And yet people like this, and not necessarily Sean King, who's writing this article, but the Black Lives Matter people don't seem to give a shit about that. They don't seem to understand that. They don't seem to understand how ironic what they are saying is. They don't seem to understand how ironic. And then, Sean, when you don't try to fucking bridge a gap between Martin Luther King and what people who are against the Black Lives Matter movement are saying, because Black Lives Matter will go around and say all lives don't. Whenever someone says all lives matter, as Martin Luther King would have fucking said, right? They're like, "Oh my god, you're trying to distract people." No, they're literally including black people because black people are people who have lives. You must not understand how the English language works. Anyway, let's get back to the article. Okay, so where was I? Booker will roll in his grave civil disobedience. Okay, after the sentence, critics were probably saying Booker T. Washington would be turning over in his grave over Dr. King's practices. King called these protests and other actions civil disobedience. In essence, he felt it was necessary to sometimes break laws, but in a civil manner, which is not what is happening or what happened in Milwaukee at all. Okay? That is not a fucking civil manner, and you understand that. He felt it was necessary to sometimes break laws, but in a civil manner, be it through a march on a road or a sit-in at a lunch counter, to demonstrate to the world that the unjust conditions being experienced in black communities all over the nation. To digress again, if Black Lives Matter was doing stuff like that and speaking as Martin Luther King was speaking, then they wouldn't be regarded as they are in 2016. Okay? To continue, the goal was to be seen and heard by the nation, and indeed the world, in order to effect demonstrative change in local communities. I totally agree. When Dr. King said, "A riot is the language of the unheard," I believe it was, in part, a peek into his own emotions and frustrations with how slow society was changing. He knew what it was like to want justice, to want equality, to want fairness and balance, but not have it. He knew what it was like to speak out but be ignored. Nonviolent resistance was not the natural human or American response to injustice, but an incredibly difficult value decision that required training to uphold. Damn straight. That Mr. King, Mr. Sean King, who wrote this, what you just wrote that's a nail on the head. That's exactly. I totally agree with that. I understand that it is a human reaction to react with violence, but it is oftentimes not the mature reaction, and that is exactly why Dr. Martin Luther King did not use it. Because he knew that although it was the more natural response, he knew that the pros do not outweigh the cons when you heed to your emotions in this case. I totally agree with that. And especially with how you put it in parentheses, or American, he says nonviolent resistance was not the natural human, in parentheses, or American, close parentheses, response to injustice. I totally agree with all the fucking, the war that was going on around that time. I think specifically it was, no, Vietnam was 1970s, and it was still about 1964, 1968. Yeah, but we had just came out of like around this was around the time period where everybody was still feeling, of course, it was only 20 years past that you're feeling the throes of World War II. You know what I'm saying? So I understand that. To continue the article, Dr. King knew then what we know now. Riots in black communities, by definition, always follow years, decades, centuries even, of people attempting to use peaceful, civil, nonviolent methods to be heard, only to be brushed aside and discounted. I agree as well. I agree with that. This is another thing that Mr. King that I've read about this. He goes into saying that this is not. A lot of people will claim that, oh my God, those monsters go on these riots just because this one person got attacked. No, it's not because of one thing. You're not paying attention. It's because of years of things happening in this community. Right? It's because of years of unrest. That's why people go on these types of attacks. It is years of bubbling emotion and unrest that causes this. To continue with the article, if you believe that the unrest and protests and anger that engulfed Ferguson in 2014 were all about the shooting death of Mike Brown, then you are either willfully ignorant or woefully misinformed. The shooting death of Mike Brown was the straw that broke the camel's back in Ferguson. Correct. In 2013, the year before Brown was shot, killed, and left on the hot pavement for hours for the community to see, police issued an outstanding 32,975 arrest warrants when the town only had 21,135 residents. This wasn't an aberration. Ferguson's black community was a complete police state for years on end, as white city leaders openly discussed bilking the community and increasing their budget on the back of constant fines and tickets to people of color. Now, this I kind of take issue with. Just because the town, according to you, only has 21,135 residents, doesn't mean it doesn't have such a crime rate that would allow for 32,975 arrest warrants. We would have to know how many of those arrest warrants were little bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know, someone wasn't able to pay their their ticket on time, or was it something violent? Was it something dangerous? Because that is a different situation, and he doesn't actually explain any kind of difference between those two situations. He just kind of paints it with his words like they're doing this because they're dirty colored people, and the people who run the city are clean, evil white people. Right? That's kind of what the vibe I'm getting here from his words, the way he phrased them. This also, at the end, he says, I'm going to leave out the word white because fucking racist. I'm just going to say city leaders openly discussed bilking the community and increasing their budget on the back of constant fines and tickets to people. And I'm going to leave out the of color as well because fucking racist. Now, that is something that I'm actually concerned for, because that is just fucking disturbing behavior from city leaders, right? I feel like they don't know ways to get money, right? And so one of the ways they think it's okay to do it is to abuse the law to try and catch more people and get tickets out of them. And you'll see a lot of in modern cities, like I live around Atlanta and I used to live in Athens, and there's a bunch of the first ticket I ever got in my life, and I didn't even know I ran the red light. The first ticket I ever got in my life was from a camera. It wasn't from a police officer. It wasn't from me killing a family of 4 like that one drunk fucker did, who they let go because he was rich, and they claim that that's a mental issue. That he developed a mental disease because he was rich. It was from a fucking camera seeing me cross a red light. And now I shit myself every time I have to fight the lights before they're right about to change, because now I'm thinking, oh my God, is there a camera watching me? You know what I'm saying? And I have no idea knowing until you get the bill, right? And that was a $70 ticket for one time, for that never ever happening before in my history of driving. So this camera stuff, that's I don't see how that could actually result in. Perhaps it does. Perhaps statistically it does. But I do not personally see how that actually results in safety for American civilians. That sounds like utter fucking bullshit. Alright? That's not about American civilians being protected. That's about, I want to catch these motherfuckers in the act so I can charge them and get money for the city. That's what that shit is about. When you put police on the side of a road, what happens to cars? They slow down. I know y'all have noticed this. If you're an adult and you drive back and fro, to and fro to work, you know if you see a fucking copper on the side of the street, you're going to slow down. The same thing with, there's a lot of these signs now in Georgia where they'll actually clock your speed, they'll catch your speed, and then they'll show you in a flashing light if you're going over. Like the numbers will flash. And that causes people to slow down. I see it all the fucking time when I go to work. Because when we're crossing a certain part of the river, I don't want to give too much away about my home. I doubt anyone will give a fuck. But still, when I'm crossing a certain river, the there's a light there, not a light, but a camera that will tell you if you're going too fast, and people will slow down. You know what I'm saying? These cameras don't do that. These cameras are only about catching you after the fact, right? They're only about the fucking money. It's not about helping people to pay more attention because you can barely see them most of the time. And the thing is, sometimes they're not even on the street. Sometimes they're not on a light on a four-way intersection, and sometimes they are. So this shit is not about protecting civilians. This shit is about clearly about getting money. Anyway, to wrap that, to go back in. So I understand what he's saying when he's talking about bilking the community. I understand that. To get back to the article. Mike Brown did not need to be the perfect victim for the people of Ferguson to be pushed too far. Brown was killed on August 9th, 2014. Conditions were already so bad on August 8th, 2014, that people had every right to revolt the day before his death. His death in the middle of the street on a hot summer day in front of the entire community was not the lone sole cause of the response that followed, but the very tip of the iceberg. That I can understand. Just to digress for a sec, that I can understand, and I agree that Mike Brown dying is not the one thing that made the community of Ferguson want to riot. That community did not need for Mike Brown to be the second coming of Jesus Christ in order to be outraged. They were already there. Police brutality, racism, over-policing, unemployment, poor schools, substandard housing, stark inequality were already the norm the day Brown was killed. His death was a match that lit a powder keg that took decades to build there. I agree with that. And no, I don't think it was necessarily his death alone. I think it was also the feeling of not being listened to. I think that was the biggest thing that the people rioted about, was that I don't know when the riots occurred. I would have to check that up, but I think they occurred after it was already confirmed that the DA or whoever was not going to be charging the police officer, even after the even after the whole investigation situation where they had the conflicting investigations where some people felt like he was charging, but others felt like he was falling down and he was this distance away. No, he was this close. It was all kinds of shit in the news that was arguing either or. Continuing with the article. Such was the case in Los Angeles with the riots in 1992 after a jury acquitted 4 LAPD officers in the brutal and excessive assault of Rodney King. That acquittal, no doubt, was a grave injustice, but what it did was push the people already on the edge past their limits. Police brutality and racial inequality in Los Angeles were not introduced with that terrible verdict. By that time, they were already commonplace. Rodney King was filmed being beaten on March 3rd, 1991. For that following year, black folk all over Los Angeles peacefully demonstrated and protested. That spring, summer, fall, and winter, protests gripped Los Angeles, but riots never ensued. People, as best they could, were trying to demonstrate their anger and frustration with civil disobedience. Then, over a year later, after community leaders all over Southern California had expended every ounce of skill and compassion they had to hold the community together, the verdict to acquit the officers came down on April 29th, 1992. That I cannot argue with. That is the same situation I believe happened in Ferguson. Is that all people want is justice for these horrible things that happen. The problem with Black Lives Matter is that they smash together actual criminals and black people. They smash together the incidents that when police are forced to kill actual criminals and when they kill Eric Garner. They smash together the incidents where police come into violent conflicts with actual criminals who happen to be black, and when they kill the boy, when they just jump out of the car and gun him down because they had gotten a call that he had a gun, right? Black Lives Matter smashes those two incidents or those multiple incidents together and calls them the same thing, and they are not. They are not the same thing. Going back to the article, the verdict was so flagrant, so unjust, so outrageous that all the elocution and Bible verses in the world from local pastors there could not from local pastors there could not have held Los Angeles together. People had experienced police brutality in Los Angeles for decades on end with no justice in sight, and the hope was that the filmed beating of Rodney King would be a turning point. It wasn't. I agree. Now, I am of two minds of this. Not two minds. I'm of a very specific mind, actually. But both sides need to be spoken to when it comes to police brutality. On one end, when I'm talking to the victims of police brutality, stay the fuck down. Do not open your mouth. Do not question it. Do not struggle. Shut up. Get down. Don't move. Don't say anything. I don't care how much it hurts. Do not move. You will have every right to say everything you want and explain what happened to you once you are in front of a lawyer and safe from the police. When it is happening, keep your mouth shut. You will explain everything later. Okay? That will increase your chances of surviving that kind of circumstance. Secondly, talking to the police. I'm not going to talk to the police. What the fuck is the point? When they're in this situation, they're thinking it's my life or this suspect's life or this criminal, this fucking criminal who dares to fucking who dares to go against my power, right? That is some fucked up shit. But talking to them at that moment is irrelevant. It's not going to do anything because they're already jumpy as shit and they have the ability to murder people and get away with it. So the only way to deal with that is to deal with the police procedure, how police are allowed to touch civilians, right? What I would really like is if we had some kind of a procedure where it was like a 60-second involvement. You have to go up to the person, you ask them their name, you ask them for their ID, you ask them for any of that, any identifying information, right? Which makes it important for everyone to have ID. You get their identifying information on your camera, on your chest, and on your car. You simply document that information, you ask them a few questions, and then you let them go. After 60 seconds, do not hold them. You cannot hold them any longer. And the person who is getting interviewed by the police officer, you are required by law to answer them correctly and truthfully, right? And in a timely fashion. This way, the police officer is not allowed to go up to you and stop you past 60 seconds. They're not allowed to go up to you unless they catch you in the act of a criminal offense. Say if you're robbing somebody at the point, at gunpoint or at weapon point or whatever. Unless you are doing something that is openly criminal, and it better be guaranteed openly criminal, because if it is found later on that you were not doing something openly criminal, they should be fined, terminated, or suspended. Okay, so we will let the police know that if this person is not committing an openly criminal act, you have no power to hold them past 60 seconds. But if you are not doing anything criminal, they get that information from you, and then they go to their desk afterward, after their beat time, and then they engage in the investigation. Then they look up, this person was here and at this time, and this was the suspicious activity here. And if we see it again, if we see a pattern, then we will move on from there. But a lot of these situations happen because the police are allowed to hold civilians indefinitely, right? And the civilians obviously get upset by this. So I'm thinking maybe we could create a police procedure where they're no longer allowed to do that without absolute probable cause, and suspicion is no longer considered probable cause. Anyway, that's my way of trying to get rid of exactly what King is talking about. Sean King is talking about here, where people get fucking sick and tired of being manhandled like this by the police. I agree. Going back to the article. At that point, people had done everything they knew to do in Los Angeles. They had prayed, protested, boycotted, voted, ran for office, held rallies and community meetings, facilitated dialogues, and everything else a community could do. None of it worked. Call what happened next in Los Angeles whatever you want. Rioting, looting, an uprising, arrest, a revolution, whatever you call it, it must be viewed in its true context. People who very badly wanted to work within the confines of the system were ignored and abused, and they responded like it. Of course riots are ugly. Of course it's horrendously ugly to burn down buildings and assault complete strangers. But when a people so far, so often after a while, but when a people so far, so often after a while, this is what is going to happen. Okay, that's weird. But when a people so far, comma, so often after a while, this is what is going to happen. Should have edited that, but whatever. Over the past 72 hours, what people call rioting has ensued in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Right away, the racial gap in America could not be more clear. Yes, that is something. Yes, yes. You know why? Because the people on the that were taking the video themselves were screaming, "He's white, get him." They were screaming, "Black power, black power." If white people were running around in mad groups attacking shit, burning shit, well, not necessarily burning shit, but destroying shit. I don't know if they were burning things. I didn't see anything burning. And screaming, white power, and then they saw a black person were like, get that nigger, get that nigger. Yeah, of course the racial gap will be clear. As critics of the unrest point out that the 23-year-old man who was killed by police there on Saturday, Sybil Smith, was armed and had a criminal record, they simultaneously miss the point and confirm the deep value of Dr. King's words that a riot is the voice of the unheard. In December of 2014, Milwaukee was called the worst city in the nation for African Americans. That designation was based on opinion, but it was not. Okay, he says, that designation wasn't based on opinion, but a deep analysis of household income, the percentage of people without health insurance, educational attainment, home ownership, unemployment, incarceration rates, and mortality among infants as well as other age groups. In March of 2015, Kenya Downs, who grew up in the city, wrote a powerful piece of NPR asking the question, a powerful piece for NPR asking the question, why is Milwaukee so bad for black people? There, she shows how virtually metric imaginable. That's an interesting way to put that. There she shows how virtually metric imaginable, from education to economics to incarceration to home ownership and everything. Okay, I see what he meant to say. There she shows how virtually every metric imaginable, from education to economics to incarceration to home ownership and everything in between, make Milwaukee a place of deep pain and misery for so many African Americans. In the October of 2015, NBA player John Henson, who had just signed a $44 million contract extension from the Milwaukee Bucks, went to a local store there to buy his first Rolex watch. Upon seeing him, store employees got so deathly afraid of him that they locked the doors, pretended like the store was closed, and called the police on him. Just this past January, Milwaukee was called the most segregated city in America, and one man said he felt like living there was going back in time 60 years. When Sybil Smith was shot and killed by police on Saturday, almost 2 years to the day after Mike Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, The outrage that quickly followed the shooting was not just about Smith, or even police brutality for that matter, but was about how sick and tired of being sick and tired black folk in that city have become. If what Mr. Sean King is writing here is accurate, then I completely agree. The city is still reeling from the heinous shooting death of Don Trey Hamilton, a mentally ill homeless man who was shot 14 times and killed by the Milwaukee police. An autopsy showed that Hamilton was repeatedly shot while on the ground, sometimes in the back. Of course, nobody was held truly responsible for this. How are people supposed to process this injustice? What are they supposed to do with their emotions? This I fucking agree with, and this is what I was talking about when I say that I want to um, the police's ability to interact with civilians on a procedural and job basis, right? I would love it if the police would take some tax money and the police were as a police officer, you were required to go and work at a soup kitchen once a week or something like that. You know what I'm saying? As a police officer, you were required to do daily cleanup. You know what I'm saying? Of the not daily cleanup, but like weekly cleanup. You were required to sign up for weekly cleanup. The police need to reinvent their image because their image has been so poisoned with such destructive horror that they have visited not only against black people but the American people as a whole, right? They're not seen as helpful people. They're seen as either inconveniences, not just minor inconveniences, but either inconveniences or outright dangerous murderers. And they need to work on the cities, the states, and the nation itself needs to work on how police are viewed. And the only way to do that is to change how they're allowed to interact with civilians. Going back to the article, this narrative is not just about Los Angeles or Ferguson or Milwaukee, but about how African Americans in cities all over this country are mistreated and ignored for decades on end until they simply can't take it anymore. The new DOJ report on the Baltimore Police Department tells the story of a department so outrageously abusive and violent and discriminatory that I think the report may very well be the most damning such report I've ever heard. Now, I personally haven't read that report. I'd be interesting to read it. I'd be interesting. I would be interested in reading it. Let me go back to where I was. All right. It didn't detail dozens of, or hundreds of, or even thousands of cases of African Americans being harassed by police there, but hundreds of thousands of cases. The sheer volume boggles the mind and instantly illuminates why so much unrest emerged there after the brutal death of Freddie Gray. Now, to say that, Mr. King, I want to repeat myself. Black Lives Matter likes to take situations like Freddie Gray, which we really don't understand why that sort of thing was allowed to happen, and then take situations that are, like you said, the hundreds of thousands of cases where it's violent criminals, as we all know the statistics of black people when it comes to 13 or 12% of the local population of America, when they commit like 48% of violent crimes, right? Black Lives Matter likes to take these two separate situations where one is a person who just happens to be black, who is an innocent civilian who the police just murder, right? And then because that civilian has not been suspected of any, has not been convicted of anything yet, and then people who have rap sheets a mile fucking long, Black Lives Matter like to smash them together and say they're the same person. They're not. They're not. And Black Lives Matter can't tell the difference because they're so fucking emotional. But getting to the very edge, the very last part of the article, these cities and the people in them aren't quick to anger. Quite the opposite. African Americans might be the most patient, long-suffering people in the world, but even that patience has limits. The National Guard was brought in to bring order to Milwaukee, but what the city needs right now isn't order so much, but equality. So that's Mr. Sean King's article, and I know you throughout this article, I have agreed with a hell of a lot of what he said, but I also disagree with some of the things that he's insinuated. He hasn't even necessarily said a lot that I disagree with, but some of the things that he's insinuating, I don't necessarily agree with. But yeah, that's out of this article I can get. I wish that the police procedure was changed on how they're allowed to deal with Americans, and also I wish that police were required as a part of their job to go into these communities, not just as enforcers of the law, but also people who have to help these people. You have to get emotionally tied to them. You have to get to the point where you understand where the barrier of your emotions and your job begins and ends, but you also have to get to the point where you have to touch these people on more of a level than just I am to oversee you. I am to watch you because you're out to do no good. No, you have to connect with them on a level where you're like, I'm here because it is my job to protect you as well as keep certain people in line, right? And that is the way I will act here. I'm not against you. I'm not thinking that you're against me and automatically trying to kill me. But I'm here to do my job and keep you safe. And that's what I think the police really need to focus on. And I wish that some of our fucking nation's leaders would at least come out with some kind of idea of a fucking plan. But instead, everybody's fucking worried about what stupid shit Donald Trump has said recently. Why is no one like, let's think of a plan on how to stop this from happening so much? All right. Well, that's all I have to say. I really like this article, and I would recommend anybody go to this article from it's how would you find it? It's by a gentleman named Sean King. That's Shaun King, and it's called once again King. Milwaukee riots weren't just caught. I'm sorry. Fuck. Milwaukee riots weren't just caused by Civil Smith's death or police brutality, but years of injustice. I do recommend that people read this because it is a good read, and it is very well thought out. Um, but yeah, I hope you guys actually listen to this. I know it's really long, but uh, the long videos get you a better taste of a person's mind and who they are actually as a person. That's why I like having this off the cuff conversation. I know it's a one sided conversation, but still, I like this kind of format. So I'll probably do this a lot more. But I'll also do my PTAs because I like how they're calmer, they're much less abrasive, and they're more controlled. I also write scripts for the PTAs, so I do like that style as well. All right, have a good one, guys.